Hello everyone, welcome back to 3D Underground Workshop. My name is Tricia Snyder and we are working on part 2 of my resin flower wire bracelet. I'm using 18 gauge wire for this bracelet, but you might want to start off with 22 gauge or 20 gauge if you're not used to wire weaving. So I'm starting off with 3 lengths of about 18 to 20 inch wires. And you just cut them to length and then find your middle. And then you're going to cross left over right. And you're going to pull it until you have a loop. The way I do it, I just keep pulling until it gives me quite a bit of tension. And that's where my stopping point is. So right there. Right as soon as you get the tension, then just go ahead and stop. And then that's going to be your loop. So once you get your loop, you're going to use your pliers. I recommend using ones with plastic or rubber on them, as then it won't scratch the wire. And hold it tight, and then you're going to twist from left to right 1 time. Pull your wires out and up so that they just kind of lay flat. That's how you're going to keep the wires through this whole thing. And then if you still need to even that twist out, you can just pinch those with the pliers and it'll flatten that. So now you have a loop with a twist in it. And there's your loop. So you're going to make the second wire, find your middle, and then you're going to put the left side from the back to the front and leave the right side behind the whole first part. And then you're going to make another loop, just like the first one, with the wire right over left. And you're going to keep pulling until you feel that tension on the loop. You want the loops to be about the same size. And then you're going to twist again. Where you twist is important. You need to twist it so that the top of the loop of the second loop is going to be nestled at the bottom of the first loop. So you'll see when it becomes taut right here, I'm going to hold these two with my pliers and then I'm going to twist it, and that bottom loop from the second wire is going to be nestled right underneath the top one. Like right here, you can see the loops are just about touching. So you want to go ahead and flatten those out and make sure that they're even and straight. It can be a little difficult. This part is a little hairy as far as the wires want to fall and twist, and it can be hard to keep them together. However, once you get the third wire on and twisted, it's easy from there. So now you're going to do the same with the third wire. This one is a little bit tricky because you're not going to just put it through the bottom loop. You're going to put it through the bottom of the top loop and the top of the bottom loop. And I'll show you a close-up here in just a second. But you're still going to put the left side in through the back to the front and leave the right side behind the whole thing. And then you're going to make the loop by putting the left side over the right and then pulling it to the loop so that the loop is has tension on it. This third loop is going to be a little bit bigger because it's encompassing both of the first top two. After this, all the loops should be about the same, and this may take practice. It's taken me quite a while to get everything to be even, but now that I've gotten it, it's really easy to do. So here I'm showing you how you go from back to front. You're going to go in between the top and bottom loop. And you can pause the video if you need to take a look at that a little bit closer for a little bit longer. And then you're going to just simply twist again. And this is what's going to make the first part of your bracelet. So once you twist, then you want to flatten that out again, and you want to keep your wires to the sides. And then you're going to take the left wire and you're going to pull it from back to front, over the front, all the way over, and you're going to lay it next to that last loop. You're going to take the second wire, the wire on the right side, and pull it from front to back and across, and then you're going to see how it forms another loop, and you're just going to twist that. And now you have a stable foundation to work from. And again, you want to nestle that next twist directly under the first twist, and that right there will help you keep things a little more even as you go. In some of the close-ups, I'm actually using a different set of wires. I'm using silver with it so that you can actually see the pattern better, and it's easier to distinguish the wires from each other as I'm going along. So now you're just going to keep doing the same pattern over and over again. Left to right, front to back, form that loop, and then twist. Just twist one time. And you're going to do that for about 2 inches of the wire that you want to keep. For this particular bracelet, we're going to be cutting the ends off and putting some hardware on there with a chain. So you can see the pattern emerging now that you've got a few of the loops done, but here's where things change. So when you make the next loop, after you're about 2 inches, 2 to 3 inches, depending on how big you want the bracelet, you're going to make the loop a little bit bigger, and you're going to set the twist almost a whole loop length down below. Once you get the wires uniform on each side, the loop will be even, and you can twist that. Hold the top part of the loop firm with your left hand, and then twist with your right hand, and that will keep the loop from closing up on you. Then you're going to continue to braid the same way, but you're going to make those bigger loops. So usually I make about 2 loops per section. I'll make 2 loops that are about the same size, and then I'll increase the size for about 2 loops, and then I'll make the bigger top loops about 2 loops. Sometimes I do 1, it depends on how long I want the bracelet. And then you start decreasing the size again until you get back to your original pattern. Now, because the loops are not nestled up against each other, it can be a little bit difficult to make the loops exactly even, but this is going to be covered up by the flowers, so it's not really important to make them perfect, but it is important to make sure that each twist is directly underneath the other twist, so that way the bracelet lays nice and flat and straight. Now we're going to measure the bracelet, find our middle, and then we're going to cut the ends, and altogether it's going to end up being about 7.5 inches. Now that I've got my wires out of the way, I want to cut where I've kind of measured. And be careful with this because the wires will fly. See the third video in this series for the alternate ending. It'll be very short, but I give you an alternate ending where you don't have to do any cutting and you don't need hardware. So now that you have your ends cut and you've got your bracelet the length that you want it, go ahead and get some jewelry metal glue. I suggest the jewelry metal glue because it really holds tight. It's, to me, better than regular super glue. And you can't get the light from the UV resin inside this little end piece. So it's better if you use the actual jewelry glue. Of course, it's not going to be instant dry. I would let it set up for at least 24 hours before you give it as a gift or wear it. Make sure your pieces fit before you add the glue. You're going to crimp these ends and make just kind of a little circle with them, and then add this bell end to it. Now, the bell ends are extremely difficult to find. There is another piece that I recommend, and I'll have that in the description. It's a lot easier to find and less expensive. But I like these bell ends. They're very flowy, and I think they kind of go along with the loop. When I put these on after the glue is on, I go ahead and twist it 3 or 4 times just to disperse the glue around the entire inside, and then make sure it's sitting on there nice and snug, and then just let it set for about, like I said, 24 hours or so. If you get a little glue on the wires or on your end piece, just wipe that off quickly because it'll start to dry and set up pretty fast, enough to where it will tarnish your jewelry. I always wipe any excess off, make sure the tip is very clean, immediately put the cap back on, and I never have any problems with it sticking or gluing itself shut. So we're going to set that aside, and we're going to work on our flower. The flower, the middle flower, is important that it stays on the bracelet at all costs. So what I do is put a back on it, and this is a bead cap, and it's pretty curved, so I flatten it out. And then we're going to use a wire on it to wire it to the flower or to the bracelet. And that's going to help stabilize it, and then the resin will adhere. So we're going to need some 24 or 26 gauge wire. You want to stick with the color that goes along with the bracelet, so it'll just kind of disappear into the bracelet. And you're just going to weave that in to the back end of the cap. Make sure it lays nice and flat. And then that bottom piece is going to hold the flower onto the bracelet a little bit more securely than just having resin alone. So now we're going to go back to our Crafteka UV resin dip. It's nice and thick, it stays put, so I use this exclusively for placing things and making sure that they get a good adhesion. The flower is essentially hollow at this point, so the best thing to do is get a droplet of the resin dip, and you're going to basically paint it on the back and build up a little tiny hump, so that way when you put the second coating of the UV resin dip on, then the end cap will have something to adhere to. So right now it's basically hollow, so you're just filling in that spot. So cure that first layer. That'll give you a nice round smooth area to put a second layer, and then that's what you're going to use for adhesion. The end cap has all kinds of little holes in it. The UV light will penetrate that just fine. If you do have an end cap that doesn't have holes in it, you might want to use jewelry glue for this part. So you want to make sure that it doesn't pop off. So place the end cap by holding the wire and place it exactly where you want it. And then you're just going to cure that into place. I cure it pretty well here with the UV light, but you still want to put it under your lamp and just let it set for a couple of minutes, back and front, top and bottom, just to make sure that everything is really, really hard and set up correctly. So once that's done and your end caps are dried, you can go ahead and set the flower in. You want to straighten out your wires, and then find the middle, and you're going to put the wires through very close together, but make sure they're on each side of one of the wires in the middle, and then you're just going to twist it and twist it and twist it. These little 24 or 26 gauge wires will hold it in place fabulously, especially with the UV resin over the top of it. However, when you're twisting, They are a little more fragile, so be careful you don't over twist and break them. So now just cut off the excess wire, and you want to make this a little bit short, and you're just going to use your pliers, give it a final twist, just make sure it's nice and secure, and then you're just going to tuck that up inside the top part of the bracelet. When you put the UV resin in, it'll hold it in place. There's no way it'll come out. And that way the customer or you or the person you're giving this to, whoever's wearing the bracelet, won't feel anything rough on their skin. But if there is a little bit of roughness, if you used a higher gauge wire, you can't get it quite tucked in, you can just put a little bit of UV resin on the top there and it'll be just fine. So now we're going to use the UV resin dip to hold the flower in place. It's basically, you're just gluing it with UV resin. And just use a little bit at a time. Use your instrument, whatever you're using, wire like I'm using, or a toothpick, and just disperse that around the bottom very carefully. Make sure that the resin doesn't leak out into the bottom part of the bracelet where the person's hand's going to be, because you don't want that necessarily touching and causing problems there. But it's easy to keep the UV resin above that because it's so thick. If you start curing it right away, it's not going to go anywhere. It pretty much stays where you put it. And that's one of the reasons I love this resin so much, is because it's so much thicker. It's like a paste almost, like a clear paste. And it just stays where you put it. And it cures very fast. So get your flower exactly where you want it, put a little bit at a time, and cure as you go. You can see there's no UV resin that has come out on the other side of the bracelet, and the tiny little droplet that you might use to just cover that little tiny wire is going to be fine, but they're not going to feel any kind of scratching or anything on that. So now you want to just kind of make sure it's completely in place, and you're going to do the other side, and then it's going to be as hard as a rock. You will not be able to get this off. So now you've got your flower on your bracelet, and you can either use leaves or flowers on each side. For this one, I used leaves. I did another one immediately after this one that was flowers on each side, as you saw, and it's just beautiful. Like I said, I do the hardware on the bottom, but watch for part 3 and I'll show you an alternate ending. I just love this bracelet, and people seem to like it quite a bit. And congratulations, you've made your first UV flower resin braided bracelet. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you all.